Hello everyone, I'm here with my next video on the chapter Mrs. Packletide's Tiger. This story has been written by Saki, whose actual name is H. Munro. Now, since this chapter has got instances of hunting, let us see why actually people used to hunt. Number one reason was for pleasure. Number two was thought to be an act of bravery. Number three, for showing social status. Number four, to protect the crops. Number five, selling skin and bones. And number six was for food. Now let's go through the summary quickly. Mrs. Packletide wanted to shoot a tiger. Her primary motivation to do so was that Luna Bimberton had recently been carried 11 miles in an aeroplane by an Algerian aviator, and she talked of nothing else. Only a personally procured tiger skin and lots of press photographs could compensate for that. Mrs. Packletide had offered 1,000 rupees for the opportunity of shooting a tiger without much effort. A neighboring village could offer her this opportunity. Because of its age and waning hunting skills, a tiger was frequenting the village for smaller domestic animals. On the appointed night, Mrs. Packletide and her paid companion, Miss Mebbin, crouched on a platform that was constructed for the hunt. A goat was tethered at the correct distance. When the tiger appeared, it seemed to lay flat on the earth at the sight of the goat, in order to get some rest before beginning the attack. Mrs. Packletide took the shot, and the tiger lay dead. Mrs. Packletide was already imagining the lunch party. It was Miss Mebbin who pointed out that the goat had been shot, not the tiger. Apparently, the old tiger had succumbed to heart failure because of the noise of the shot. Though Mrs. Packletide was annoyed at the discovery, she at least had a dead tiger in her possession. Mrs. Packletide's fame traveled from the pages of Texas Weekly Snapshot to the other papers. Luna Bimberton refused to look at an illustrated paper for weeks. Though she declined the invitation for lunch, her letter of thanks to Mrs. Packletide for the tiger-clawed brooch was a model of suppressed emotions. Miss Mebbin then surprised Mrs. Packletide by suggesting that she would reveal the real story of how the tiger was killed. In return for keeping quiet, Miss Mebbin got Mrs. Packletide to buy her a pretty weekend cottage in Dorking. Mrs. Packletide does not indulge in big game shooting anymore. The incidental expenses are so heavy, she says. So this was a humorous story. Let us now move on to the question and answers. Question 1. Why did Mrs. Packletide wish to shoot a tiger? The answer is she wanted to outdo Luna Bimberton, who had shot a tiger, had been carried 11 miles in an aeroplane by an Algerian aviator, and had been in the news. Question 2. What visions did Mrs. Packletide have in her mind of upstaging Luna Bimberton and stealing the attention from her? The answer is nothing less than a personally procured tiger skin. A large array of news in the newspapers around the world would do for Mrs. Packletide. She had already arranged in her mind the lunch that she would give at her house in Curzon Street. For all outward appearances in Luna Bimberton's honor, with a tiger-skinned rug occupying most of the foreground and all of the conversation. She had also already designed in her mind the tiger claw brooch that she was going to give Luna Bimberton on her next birthday. Question 3. What was Mrs. Packletide's feeling for Luna Bimberton? The answer is Mrs. Packletide did not like Luna Bimberton. So great was her dislike that she did everything in order to be one up on her. Question 4. Why did Mrs. Packletide offer 1,000 rupees to the villagers? Mrs. Packletide had offered 1,000 rupees to the villagers for the opportunity of shooting a tiger without over much risk or exertion. Question 5. What kind of tiger was found suitable for this hunting expedition? The answer is they chose a tiger of respectable antecedents, one who was old and owing to age-related infirmities could only come to the village to feast on smaller domestic animals. Question 6. What efforts did villagers make to prevent the tiger from wandering away from the area? The answer is the villagers posted children night and day on the outskirts of the local jungle to head the tiger back in case he decided to roam away to fresh hunting grounds. Cheaper kinds of goats were left around with elaborate carelessness to keep him satisfied with his present situation. Even the women who were returning home from the fields used to hush their singing so as not to disturb the tiger. Question 7. What was Louisa Mebbin's attitude towards money? How did she use this hunting expedition to her advantage? Louisa Mebbin dreaded performing an atom of service more than she had been paid for and was ruthless in her possessiveness towards money in general. In short, she was thrifty and was obsessed with money. She did not hesitate to blackmail someone in order to obtain a material possession. Louisa Mebbin used the hunting expedition as an opportunity to play upon Mrs. Packletide's insecurity. She manipulated Mrs. Packletide into buying her silence in the form of a weekend cottage for herself. She is shrewd, thrifty, and opportunistic person who is obsessed with money and was no qualms in exploiting circumstances for her own advantage. Here we can see Mrs. Mebbin, her house less flowers and tiger lilies growing in her garden. Question 8. What did the tiger do upon catching sight of the goat? The answer is the tiger lay flat on the earth, seemingly less from a desire to take advantage of all available cover than for a purpose of snatching a short rest before moving on to the grand attack. Question 9. How did villagers celebrate the apparent success of the hunting expedition? The answer is the villagers swarmed onto the scene. They shouted in great excitement and the happy news spread to the village where a thumping of tom-toms took up the chorus of triumph. Question 10. What was discovered after the death of the tiger? Who discovered it? The answer is Louisa Mebbin drew attention to the fact that the bullet had hit the goat. Evidently, the tiger had died due to a heart failure which was caused by the loud noise of the firing of the rifle accelerated by senile decay. Now let us start with reference to context. Let us see the first one. Read the extract and answer the questions that follow. The first extract is, Mrs. Packletide had already arranged in her mind the lunch she would give at her house in Curzon Street, ostensibly in Luna Bimberton's honor, with a tiger-skinned rug occupying most of the foreground and all of the conversation. So the question 1 of this extract is, what was the greatest motivation for Mrs. Packletide to kill a tiger? The answer is, her greatest motivation for hunting a tiger was to gain social status and one-upmanship over Luna Bimberton. Question 2. What gift did she intend to give Luna Bimberton? The answer is she intended to give a tiger claw brooch to Luna Bimberton on her next birthday. Question 3. What was peculiar about the tiger chosen for hunting? The answer is the tiger was old and feeble who could not be a threat or danger to Mrs. Packletide in any way. Question 4. In which country is the story set? What can be inferred about the historical setting of the story? The answer is the story is set in India, which was a British colony at that time. The historical setting reflects the colonial attitude of the time in which the British were clearly the masters and asserted dominance over the native people. They engaged in activities that demonstrated their power and superiority. The story also reflects the fascination with big game hunting and desire for wealthy individuals to engage in exotic activities to prove their bravery and skill. Question 2. Now let us read the extract of question 2. If it's an old tiger, I think you ought to get it cheaper. 1,000 rupees is a lot of money. Question 1. What instances of Louisa Mebbin's miserly attitude are mentioned just after this extract? The answer is Louisa Mebbin's energetic intervention had saved many a robber from being lost in tips in some Moscow hotel. Question 2. Why did the tiger stop before attacking the goat? The answer is the tiger stopped for the purpose of snatching a short rest before beginning the grand attack. Question 3. How did the tiger actually die? The answer is the tiger succumbed to heart failure, which was caused by the sudden report of the rifle accelerated by senile decay. Question 4. Why was Mrs. Packletide not worried that the truth about the hunting will be revealed? The answer is Mrs. Packletide was not afraid because she had paid the villagers a good amount of money and they would keep quiet. Miss Mebbin was a paid companion, hence she would not tell anyone either. Now let us quickly read the long answers. Question 1. Write the character sketch of Mrs. Packletide. The answer is Mrs. Packletide is a wealthy, competitive and ambitious woman to whom social status and recognition are very important. Her greatest motivation is to outdo her arch-rival Luna Bimberton and gain recognition for achievements that are greater than her rivals. She is willing to go to great lengths for all of this. She embarks on a tiger-killing mission and takes credit for it even though she does not kill the beast with her rifle. She is a complex character who embodies the social and cultural values of her time, including the desire for status and willingness to manipulate and deceive others for the same. Question 2. Explain what the author means when he describes Luna Bimberton as a model of repressed emotions. The answer is the author means that although Luna Bimberton felt strongly jealous and in reality would have wanted to behave otherwise, socially she refrained from expressing her feelings. Instead, she diplomatically wrote a simple thank you note which showed decorum and restraint. Question 4. What was Mrs. Packletide's true intention in arranging a luncheon party for Luna Bimberton? The answer is the true intention behind arranging a luncheon party for Luna Bimberton was to use the occasion to show off the tiger skin rug and take credit for the kill. It was meant to make others praise Mrs. Packletide and be in awe of her. It was a party to enhance her social status and reputation among her peers. Next question. Pick out the instances of humor from the story. The answer is Mrs. Packletide's motivation for everything in life is quite humorous. While others are driven by hunger and love, she is driven by her need to outdo her arch-rival. The description of the tiger before it tries to attack the goat, where he sits down not to take stock of the situation but to rest, is another humorous instance from the story. The discovery that the tiger died of a heart failure and not by being shot by Mrs. Packletide is indeed humorous. And the way Miss Louisa Mebbin manages to get Mrs. Packletide to pay for her vacant cottage adds to the humor in the story. Next question. What is Mrs. Packletide referring to when she says incidental expenses for hunting are heavy? What is the author satirizing in the story? The answer is she is referring to the hefty amount she had to pay to buy a cottage for Louisa Mebbin in order to buy her silence. The author is satirizing the British upper class, their vanity, shallowness, and the need to climb the social ladder. He uses Mrs. Packletide's action to ridicule the superficiality of her class, highlighting their lack of genuine values and ethics. Through this story, he has also highlighted the moral bankruptcy of British upper class. On the other hand, the story also satirizes the colonial attitude towards the natives. This is a tiger skin rug. I hope this video was helpful to you. Do take good care of yourself. Bye.